What's up YouTube, this is Ryan from AnnihilatorMTG here, and I'm back again with some more Modern. This week we're going to be highlighting some of the new cards from Strixhaven. This set looks incredibly cool, and there are more than a few potential Modern staples that I believe are in the set. Two of those cards are Vanishing Verse and perhaps to a lesser extent, Fracture. Vanishing Verse is incredible for many reasons. Being able to exile something instead of destroying it is always a plus, but the fact that it hits any monocolored permanent is insane. An instant speed answer that exiles Shadow, Heliod, and Jace, I'm in. Now, Fracture has a very unique strength. In the matchups where Vanishing Verse is bad, Fracture can often take its place without much worry, making this card pair an extremely potent asset in the format. To highlight these two cards, we're going to be building an Orzhov Stoneblade deck. In a format with a ton of aggro and shadow variations, Orzhov almost seems like the perfect color pairing. One change to the build that might turn some heads is the choice to not play Lingering Souls. Now, believe me, I know Lingering Souls can be an absolute house against a ton of decks in the format, but personally, I find that the 3-drop slot is a little bit crowded with arguably better cards. We're running a mix of Skyclave Apparition, Liliana of the Veil, Kaya's Guile, and of course our sword. Kaya's Guile in particular is the type of card that really excites me, especially in the current metagame. We're talking about Kolaghan's Command levels of flexibility while also being a silver bullet against aggro. It's insane. Now, it goes without saying that this deck likely gets flattened by either Tron variant, so I'm really not all that excited about that one. However, in most other matchups, I feel like this deck has a ton of merit. I'm super excited to play these new cards, so let's hop into the first match and see how it performs. Okay, looks like we found our opponent here. Best of luck to you, my friend. And this hand is a little bit underwhelming. I think we're probably going to mulligan. This is definitely better. We'll ship the Shambling Vent. They start things off by cycling a Street Wraith, then we see a Polluted Delta, they crack it for a Watery Grave, and then we see a Thoughtseize. They take our Inquisition, and we draw Skyclave. We'll start things off with a Courtyard, and then we'll pass. Next, we see a Bloodstained Mire, and we've got a decision to make. We could just play the Stoneforge, and that's probably the better move, although the Inquisition is quite tempting. That's kind of tough. I don't know, I think we're just going to play the Inquisition. Take advantage of this now while we can. They respond by Thought Scouring themselves. They hit a TBR and a Gurmag. We see a Fatal Push, a Shadow, and a Gurmag. Let's take their Shadow, and then we'll pass. I have no problem pathing their Gurmag, so this should be incredibly good. As they play a Mishra's Bauble, so their hand is back to the Blood Crypt, the Fatal Push, and the Gurmag. They crack their Bloodstained Mire, find themselves the Steam Vents. Then we see a tapped Blood Crypt, and it looks like they're passing. They draw off the Bauble, then we see a Shambling Vent. Now that we know what's in their hand, let's just leverage the Stoneforge, just to get the Fatal Push out of the way. We'll grab the Batterskull. They Lightning Bolt our Stoneforge, that's different. So their hand is Push, Gurmag, and apparently a Snapcaster. They're targeting a Thoughtseize, then they cast it. I assume they're just going to take the path, and they do. A Kaya's Guile would be tremendous here. Instead, we find a basic. I think we're sort of forced into playing the Skyclave. We'll target the Snap, and since they have no mana up and no fetchable lands on the board, their Fatal Push won't be able to get our Skyclave just yet. It depends on what they draw, though, and they find the perfect Scalding Tarn. That's quite annoying. They play their Gurmag, and now at any time they can deal with the Skyclave, we find a Shambling Vent. Let's play it. Then we're going to cast the sword. Guess we're just going to pass in the meantime. They crack their Scalding Tarn, finding themselves a Watery Grave, so it's now or never. They cast the Push. That'll get them a token. They've got 7 power on board. Then we see another Bauble. So we've got a couple of turns to figure this out. I'm not super happy about this, but it is what it is. We draw a Godless Shrine. Fair enough. We'll play that tapped, then we'll jam the Batterskull. All right, let's see what happens. They swing in with a Gurmag. The only thing that'll kill us here is Lightning Bolt plus TBR. They cast neither, and we see yet another Gurmag Angler. Let's see what we can do here. We draw field. Let's play it, then we're going to crack the Silent Clearing. We find another one. All right, no Fatal Push, please. We equip the sword. That's good for us. Let's swing in. They choose to block with the Illusion. We gain some life, and then I guess we're just going to pass. So I'm not entirely sure what they can do to get out of this one, and they scoop it up. Nice. All right, so Grixis Shadow, we've got a ton of different things that we can do against them. We're definitely going to want to bring in the Celestial Purges, and I think I want one more copy of Kaya's Guile. Then we can trim on the Brutalities, and I think maybe 1 or 2 Tidehollow Scullers. Everything else is just ridiculous against what they're doing. In fact, I would play the 4th Kaya's Guile, but I just don't think that we have the room. I mean, honestly, looking at this looks absolutely fabulous against what they're playing. Yeah, we should be fine. This hand looks serviceable enough. I don't really like mulliganing against Shadow anyways, so we're definitely going to keep this. They get things rolling with a Blood Crypt into a Thoughtseize. They take a Kaya's Guile. Beautiful. We draw a field. Not really what we're looking for. Let's start off with a Courtyard into a Thoughtseize. Let's take the Gurmag and we'll be on our way. So the good thing about this deck versus something like Shadow, or at the very least Grixis Shadow, is they don't really have that redundancy that you need to keep up with all this removal. Something like Jund is going to do a little bit better because they've got like, what, 16 threats or something like that? Either way, they play their Shockland, then they pass. We keep drawing a lot of lands. We're going to want to avoid that. Let's play a Marsh Flats, and then I think we're just going to ship it back. They play a 0-value Snapcaster. That's kind of insane. They swing in for 2. That'll take us down to 16. Let's crack the Marsh Flats, grab a Godless Shrine, we'll put that in tapped, and we're good to go. We draw a Purge, not bad. Think we're going to get a little aggressive here. Let's crack the Field of Ruin and target their Blood Crypt. We'll grab a Swamp, as do they, and then we're just going to pass. We know that their hand is Shadow plus 2 pushes and 2 unknowns, so we're not really all that scared, and it looks like they're passing. Keep drawing lands here, but it's somehow working out. Let's play the Skyclave. That'll target the Snap, then we'll pass. They cast a Fatal Push on the Skyclave, no problem. That's 1 push down. Then we see a Bauble. So as long as we can draw into something, and I mean literally anything outside of a land, I think we're going to be fine. And we find a Lily. Beautiful. All right, let's cast her. We'll Edict to the opponent. They crack their Bauble. They sack the token. We know 2 of their cards, one of which they can't play because they're at 14. And they just scoop it up. GG's. Alrighty, looks like we found our opponent here. Best of luck to you, my friends. And this hand doesn't really have all that much action, but we can get out of it with this Cling to Dust. Plus, we have a Silent Clearing, which is pretty good as well. And why not? We'll keep it. They start things off with a Cavern naming Spirits, and we see a Mausoleum Wanderer. We find a Fatal Push. That's not too bad. Let's start things off by pushing their Spirit, and then we're going to pass. They play a Flooded Strand, and it looks like they're passing. Interesting. We find another Inquisition, so let's lead off with the Marsh Flats, find ourselves a basic, then we're going to Inquisition them. We see a Spell Queller, 2 Companies, and a Canopy. Well, that's unfortunate. At the very least, we do have a little bit of time. During our end step, they crack the Flooded Strand, finding themselves a Hollowed Fountain. They play the Canopy, then we see an Aether Vial. Think we're probably just going to cycle the Cling in response, finding another one. That's not really what we're looking for. And a Skyclave. All right, well, think we're just going to play the field, then we're going to sack it targeting the Cavern. We'll grab a Plains, and now we just got to hope that they miss a land. Let's see what happens. They play Supreme Phantom. All right, that's manageable. We draw a Batterskull. Let's play a Skyclave. We'll target the Phantom. That gets exiled, and then we're going to pass. At this point, we're just banking on them not finding a land. We see a Drogskull Captain. We find a Stoneforge Mystic. I think we just have to cast it. Let's grab the sword. Let's cling the Cavern. We find another Inquisition. We'll swing in with a Skyclave. That brings them down to 16. And we're back to the gamble. Let's see if they got it. Yikes, and they do. Okay. Let's play a tapped Courtyard. Now that they found it, I think we're going to get extra aggressive. So when they crack this Flooded Strand, we're going to path their Captain. Because they already have the 4th land, them having the 5th one is kind of irrelevant. They find a tapped Plains. Our opponent grabs an untapped Breeding Pool. Then we see Coco number 1. Come on, give them a whammy one time. They find a Spell Queller and a Skyclave. Well, that's not good. Let's activate the Stoneforge in response. We'll jam the Batterskull. Then they exile the Stoneforge. They kill the Skyclave. That gives them an illusion token. On the bright side, it's going to be harder for them to attack with the illusion token, so I'm not too upset about that, I guess. Either way, we're still in a ton of trouble here. I have a feeling we're going to see a Sorcery Speed company, but maybe not. They swing in with a Spell Queller. That takes us down to 13. And we find a Brutality. Time to get crazy here. We're going to kill the Skyclave and target them both times. They respond with a company. Here's hoping they don't find a Spell Queller, and they find quite a bit. That's unfortunate. Well, at the very least, now we can play the sword, and as much as I hate to say it, I don't think we can attack. This is not looking good for us. They crack the Canopy. They've got 3 cards in hand. We see a tapped Temple Garden. They swing in with the Flyers. That takes us all the way down to 5. not good. We find a Thoughtseize, not really what we're looking for. Let's equip the sword, then we're going to swing in. They respond with a Vial, finding a Skyclave, and then they're going to hit the sword. Well, that was a miserable experience. I think what we want to do in this matchup is side in the Sword of Fire and Ice instead of the Feast and Famine. The brutalities are super weak. I think the Kaya's Guiles are infinitely better. Outside of that, we don't really have much specialized for this matchup. Yeah, this is probably fine. Let's play the Courtyard, then we'll cast the Thoughtseize. We see a Supreme Phantom, Double Captain, and a Coco. Let's take the Phantom. That's actually not the most explosive hand for them, so I'm pretty happy about that. We find a Marsh Flats. Let's play a basic, then we're going to cast the Stoneforge. They respond by cracking their fetch, getting a Breeding Pool. Let's get that sword, and then we'll pass. Next, we see a tapped Hollowed Fountain into a Noble. Sure. Beautiful. We draw Fatal Push. Let's hit the Noble. That was probably one of the best cards that we could have possibly drawn. They cast a Shacklegeist. Let's get a basic, then we're going to respond and jam the sword. We find a Cling. Let's equip the sword. We'll swing in. Then we hit the Spirit with a sword trigger. Then we cast a Sculler. I think we're going to take the Coco to eliminate their explosive plays. I think if they only play a Drogskull Captain, we pretty much win, and I guess they see that as well. All right, let's see what we can do. Honestly, I'm not too thrilled with this hand. It does have some of the interaction that we want, but it's slow on the mana, and I'm not a huge fan of having the sword already in hand. We'll ship it back, and this hand is incredible. I think we just ship the verse. Triple removal and hand attack, I'll take that. They start things off with a Cavern naming Human. That's always fun. We draw basic. Let's play the Courtyard, then we're going to push the Noble. And now we get to see how they do without their accelerated mana. They play their second Cavern, and they pass. Nice. We draw field. It's not really what we're looking for. Let's play a basic, then we're going to hit him with an Inquisition. Ooh boy. We see double Skyclave and a Drogskull Captain. Guess we have to take the Captain. At the very least for now, their Skyclaves are just stranded. They do play a Shacklegeist though. Man, I don't know. I think we have to do it. Let's hit it with a Path, and they get their mana. Very unfortunate. We draw Batterskull. Let's play the field, then we're going to hit the Haunt. They find a forest. Then we see an island. And I guess all we can do now is just hope that they don't have a Coco. We draw yet another fetch. They play a Botanical Sanctum into a Shacklegeist. Let's path it during the end step, and now we might be able to get a little aggressive. They fail to find a basic. Let's get a tapped Godless Shrine. Like clockwork, we draw more lands. Let's try to thin things out a bit, and then we'll cast the Batterskull. We'll pass in the meantime. They seem to be flooded as well. Beautiful. Well, if that's not karma, I don't know what is. We're going to swing in with a Germ. That takes them down to 16 and us to 22. They crack their fetch land, grabbing a tapped Hollowed Fountain. Our opponent draws a Mausoleum Wanderer, no problem. We find another field. All right, I guess this is just what we do now. Let's hit the Hollowed Fountain. We grab a Plains, and now we're going to attack. Drain them for 4. At the very least, what we're doing here is buying a significant amount of time. They pass. We draw a Sculler. All right, think we want to attack first. We drain them for 4 again. Let's try to play the Sculler. They're paying costs. They respond with a Spell Queller, super annoying. If we can just find ourselves a sword or something, this would be incredible. They decide to get aggressive with a Skyclave. Then they play a Lonely Vial. And honestly, even with their 3 creatures, I don't really know what they do. We find another Sculler coming in clutch. Let's take their dude, then we'll swing in. They're blocking. The Queller dies. We're going to cast a Sculler. That hits nothing. We're all the way up to 34, which is pretty ridiculous. Let's equip the Batterskull to the Sculler that has something underneath it. And now, barring some ridiculous Cocos, I don't really know what our opponent does here. And they scoop it up. GG's. Okay, looks like we found our opponent here. Best of luck to you, my friend, and we won the die roll. This hand looks pretty good. We'll keep. Let's lead things off with a basic swamp into an Inquisition and see what we're dealing with. We find an Inquisition, a Scourge, 2 Thoughtseizes, and 2 basics. Well, is what it is. Let's take the Scourge. Our opponent also plays a swamp into an Inquisition. They take the Stoneforge, and we draw Shambling Vent. So we might as well just play that and then pass. Since our opponent's going to be destroying our hand no matter what, I actually kind of like that we're drawing the Shambling Vents. It's really not that big of a deal. They hit us with a Thoughtseize. They take the Vanishing Verse. We see a forest, and they pass. We see yet another Shambling Vent. Let's play one of them. Let's see if our opponent has another land. They waste a Thoughtseize. No problem. And they pass. Excellent. We draw Thoughtseize of our own. Let's continue the tradition. We see a Bolt, a Scourge, and another Thoughtseize. We take the Scourge, and we'll pass. This is definitely one of those stalemate games where getting more lands can actually be beneficial. Looks like our opponent found a Tarmogoyf. No problem. We draw a Path. That'll work. Let's wait for the draw step. Then we're going to cast the Path targeting the Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf, and we see a Hex Drinker that gets leveled up immediately. We can definitely work with that. Since our opponent's out of basics, we're actually in a phenomenal position. Let's cast the push, then we'll animate a Shambling Vent, swing in for 2, we drain them, and we're good to go. Let's see if they get a land. They do. We see a Godless Shrine, so we're dealing with Abzan. Well, that's certainly different. And we find a Lily. Let's uptick. Actually, it's probably more correct to say that we're dealing with 4 color since we did see a Lightning Bolt. Thing is if they don't have another land, then they can't really do anything with their Luris, and I think they see that as well. They scoop it up. Nice. All right, not bad. Not bad at all. I think the Celestial Purges are going to be absolutely fabulous. The Brutality's not so much. Kaya is also fantastic. I think we can probably cut like 1 copy of Lily for a Kaya. Then we need to trim 1 more card. Maybe we can trim a Tidehollow Sculler. That's not terrible. Yeah, I think this can work. Now, unfortunately, as much as I like this hand, we can't keep something with just a basic Plains. If this sword was like a Courtyard or something, I think we could probably keep it, but not like this. This one sort of has the opposite problem, but I think we have to keep. Let's ship a basic, because I know that we can leverage this field. And wait a minute, did they let us go on the play? Interesting. Well, let's start off with a Courtyard, then we'll hit him with a Thoughtseize. We see a Shadow, a Push, a Renegade, a Scourge, and a Goyf. Haven't seen Renegade in quite some time. I think weirdly enough, we're just going to take the push. This is going to be one of those games where if we can get a Sword of Feast and Famine, we are going to be cruising. Looks like they're getting started with the Bauble. Then we see a Bloodstained Mire. They crack that immediately. We see an Overgrown Tomb, and then the Renegade. Not bad, especially in a deck with Mishra's Bauble. That actually seems pretty easy to activate. Although we do draw push. Let's play the Marsh Flats. Then we're going to grab a Swamp. We'll cast the Stoneforge. Let's grab the sword, and then hope that they don't have any hand attack or removal. Well, they seem to be quite eager, as they swing in for 2. We're obviously not going to block that. They play a Mishra's Bauble and crack it, targeting themselves. Then we see a Bloodstained Mire. They crack that as well. They find a Godless Shrine, and there's a Scourge. So far, so good. We find an Inquisition. Let's play the field. Then we're going to push the Scourge. So now we get to hold up the Stoneforge activation and pretty much just go from there. Once again, we're absolutely not going to be blocking the Renegade. That takes us down to 13. We see a Nurturing Peatland, then a Tarmogoyf. Let's activate the Stoneforge during their end step. We jam the sword, and we find a path. Nice. Let's play the Shambling Vent, then we're going to equip the sword, and it actually resolves. Fantastic. We'll swing in. They can't block. That takes him down to 10. Then they discard a Lightning Bolt. Let's cast an Inquisition. We see a Shadow and a Scourge. Let's take the Scourge. Then I think I want to crack the field, targeting their Peatland. Beautiful. And now we just hold up the path. They swing in for 7. Let's path the Goyf. They find themselves a forest. Their attack takes us down to 11. We're probably going to see a Shadow. Yes, indeed. And make that 2. Oh boy. Well, that's going to complicate things. We find a land. I unfortunately think we just have to pass. They put the Luris in the hand. They choose not to attack. Let's crack the Marsh Flats, attempting to thin out the deck. We get a Godless Shrine. We find a Silent Clearing. We crack it, grab a Stoneforge. It's not terrible. We cast the Stoneforge, then we find a Batterskull. I think we can sort of make this work. They cast a Thoughtseize. Let's activate the Stoneforge. We jam a Batterskull. That pumps their shadows significantly. They swing in for 10. Let's block one of them. We're down to 5. Then they cast a Luris. We see a Mishra's Bauble. They play a tapped Blood Crypt. And this is the moment of truth if I've ever seen one. During our upkeep, they crack the Bauble. Let's see what we get. And a Purge. Beautiful. Let's equip the Batterskull to the Stoneforge. Then we're going to swing in. That takes him down to 1. We untap. And I think we're good. As long as we hold up the Purge, we should be fine. Even if they have a TBR, we block one of the shadows and then purge the other one. The double strike doesn't mean anything if we have protection from black and green. The most they'll be able to get in for is 5. They're replaying baubles. All right, let's see if our opponent can pull a rabbit out of the hat. And they do not. GG's. That was a close one. And there we have it. Orzhov Stoneblade can really put in work. I think that this is the type of deck that has a really good chance of becoming more of a household name in the format. Outside of the crushing weakness to Tron builds, this deck can really perform well if you have a good feel for the format. I originally planned on playing a deck with Prismari Command in it this week, but unfortunately while recording, I experienced a bug that gave me an unfair advantage. I of course conceded on the spot once I noticed and sent in a bug report to Wizards. For those curious, they ended up discarding 2 cards while I drew 2 for free, and at that point, there was really no way I could continue the match, so I'm probably going to be holding off on this card until the bug is fixed. I also have a channel announcement. I'm feeling pretty under the weather as I'm recording this, and have a ton of renovations to take care of next week, so there's a small chance that the next video will be postponed. I'll try to get it done after I finish editing this week's video, but I gotta tell you, I'm exhausted, so I'm sorry if I miss it. Either way, if you enjoy my content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. This stuff really does help, so thank you, and as always, stay safe out there and have a good one.